Hello everyone, so today I'm gonna tackle the laboratory test number 9, the specific gravity and absorption of fine aggregates. So the significance and use of this method is that aggregate specific gravity is needed to determine the weight to volume relationships and to calculate various volume related quantities such as voids in mineral aggregate. The apparatus that needed in this method is balance, pictometer, mold, tamper, electrical oven, and a container suitable to submerge the sample with water. So for the test sample, first is obtain approximately 1 kg of the fine aggregate material passing the number 4 or 4.75 mm sieve from the sample using the applicable procedures described as to T289, reducing field sample of aggregate to test size. Number 2 is dry it in a suitable pan or vessel to constant weight at 110 degrees Celsius. Allow it to cool to a comfortable handling temperature. Cover with water by immersion and permit to stand for 15 to 19 hours. So number 3 is dry the sample to a saturated surface dry or SSD condition. Spread sample on a flat, non-absorbent surface and stir it occasionally to assist it in homogeneous drying. So throughout this drying process, the aggregate should be repeatedly tested for a SSD condition using the cone test as follow. So A is fill a cone-shaped metal mold to overflowing with drying aggregate. B is slightly tap the aggregate into the mold with 25 light drops of a small metal tamper. C is remove the loose aggregate from the outside of the mold and carefully lift the mold vertically. So D, if the surface moisture is still present, the fine aggregate will retain its molded shape. When the aggregate achieves an SSD condition, it will slump slightly. So E, upon the first test where slumping occurs, record the weight of the aggregate as SSD mass. So note, if the aggregate slumps of the first cone test it is assumed that the aggregate has already dried beyond the SSD condition. So the aggregate can be restored by truly mixing in a small amount of water and allowing aggregate to stand in a covered container for 30 minutes. So for the procedures, first is determine the mass of the sample to the nearest 0.1%. Number 2 is weigh 500 grams of the SSD sample. Number 3 is calibrate a specific gravity plus pictometer by filling with water at 23 degrees Celsius to the calibration line and determine the mass. Number 4 is place 500 plus minus 10 grams of the SSD aggregate into the pictometer and fill with water at 23 degrees Celsius to 90% of pictometer capacity. To agitate the pictometer to eliminate air bubbles and then determine the total mass of the pictometer. So 5 is add additional water to return the pictometer to its calibrated capacity. So note, if bubbles prevent proper filling of the pictometer, adding few drops of isopropyl alcohol is recommended to disperse the foam, the Ash2 2000A. 6 is determine the total weight of pictometer, specimen, and water. 7 is remove the aggregate from the pictometer and dry it until it maintains a constant mass. And last is cool the aggregate in air at room temperature for 1.0 plus 0.5 hours, then determine the mass.